We're looking at family, marriage, and home today. Very important topic. I couldn't stress the importance of this topic in the day in which we live. We're living in a day, if we just start with the first column, if we start with the family, we're living in a day when the family has been redefined. After thousands of years of history, our modern world has decided to redefine the family. My daughter is a teacher, and she was at university a few years ago, and I got a WhatsApp or a text message from her one day, and it was a photo that she'd taken in the university of a page of whatever they were being taught. And I wrote down the words on the page that she was taught in the university in the UK. There is no such thing as a typical family. And you say, well, what do they mean by that? Well, if they just simply meant that families can get messy sometimes and things can happen, but no, what they're saying is there is no standard. There's no biblical norm. You cannot say it should be one man and one woman. And so we live in the world of same-sex families and cohabitation and polyamory and all these kind of things that you've maybe never heard of and don't want to know about. But what's being forced upon us today is the idea that any group of individuals who wants to get together and form a family is legitimate. And if you say anything against that, you're a bigot. And that makes it very difficult for Christians and teenagers in school and university to sort of cope with being the odd man out, when only 5 minutes ago the whole world believed that, and now it's just flipped on its head. So we just need to remind ourselves that the world doesn't have the right to redefine the family. And the reason for that is it was God who designed the family in the first place. So because God designed the family, God defines the family. Because he was the one who came up with the idea of the family, then it is his prerogative to define what a family is. So in Genesis chapter 1, verse 27, we see the divine design for the family. It's a husband and a wife and children. Amazing that one has to say that, but that's what the Bible teaches. God created them male and female, and he said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. And a new family is only formed when a marriage takes place between a man and a woman. A biblical family is only formed when a marriage takes place between a man and a woman. Of course, a family may be disrupted by bereavement or by divorce, but those disruptions and difficulties cannot be sort of harnessed to assert that any collection of individuals makes a family. That's what they're doing. That's the sort of subtext with what my daughter was being taught at school. Now, the family is not just some sort of abstract thing that we better hold to because it's in the Bible. God has designed the family as the basic building block of society. You might not think of how does society hold together because you're sort of born into it and it just is there. You know, Costco's over here and the school's over there and the hospital's over there and mum and dad, and it all just works. And you never think, so what if we didn't have families? Somebody once said you can have a family without a nation, but you can't have a nation without families. You can have a family without a society. Adam and Eve were a family without a society. But you can't have a society without a family. And what we have seen in my lifetime is the breakdown of family life. And because of the breakdown of family life, we then have the breakdown of society. If you talk to sociologists or psychologists, maybe I don't know what they would say, but if you talk to people who are involved in education, in hospitals, in mental health, etc., 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 they will tell you that what's happened is we have an epidemic of family breakdown. Dysfunctional families, maybe whatever they're called, fatherlessness, Kids being raised, they don't know who their dad is, they don't know who their mum is. And if you see the results of that on the streets, the overflowing prisons and the chaotic schools and suicide and drug epidemics and so on, and you go back, yes, of course, you can have a black sheep and a good family. But I wouldn't put a number on it, but in the majority of cases, what we're seeing, the violence and disorder and vandalism and all of this kind of stuff, on the one hand, you think, well, it's the fault of X, but you also have to feel desperately sorry for kids raised in this dysfunctional situation where they're just exposed to stuff and the home is chaotic and there's stepmothers and stepfathers and all this kind of stuff going on, and it's very, very difficult for children being raised in this society. So if you have been raised or are being raised in a stable, loving family with a mother and a father, just thank the Lord for it. You might think to yourself, oh, I wish I had more freedom. Well, you'll get your chance later on in life. But the value of a stable home with a mother and a father that love you, and you come home from school perhaps, or maybe you're homeschooled or whatever it is, you maybe just take it for granted. It's just normal. It's not normal in today's world. And, well, we can say the family is the cornerstone of society. The family is also the cornerstone of assemblies. It's a wonderful thing when you see mums and dads coming in. And if you're a single parent today, I'm not excluding in any way. Whatever this family situation is, bringing your kids into the meetings and to Sunday school and all of bringing them up in the fear of the Lord. What would the assemblies be without families, without young people? Families are gold dust, brethren. Cling on to your families and look after your families and take an interest in your family. Now, if the family is the foundation of society, let's move to the middle column now. Marriage is the cornerstone of the family. So we're kind of going back a step here. You think of society, the world in which we live. What really glues that all together is the concept of family. But what glues the family together? If families glue society, what is it that actually glues the family together? Well, God has ensured that families will be glued together by inventing something called marriage. Marriage is the cornerstone of the family. If you think of the marriage as the structure of a house, if you think of the family as the structure of the house, the foundation is this marriage. You say, well, what is marriage? Well, I've got a little definition written down here. Marriage is the joining together of one man and one woman in a lifelong, covenantal one flesh union modelled upon Christ and his church. Maybe I should say that again. Marriage is the joining together of one man and one woman in a lifelong, covenantal, one flesh union modelled on Christ and the church. Yeah, I love going to weddings. I don't like the hanging around for photographs and all that kind of stuff, but I do love it just to hear the vows. And when the man says, I now pronounce you husband and wife, there's just something about that gives me the chills. I don't know what it is. I feel quite emotional. In a chaotic society like that, when I see a Christian couple coming together and saying their vows and they're pronounced husband and wife, and the Lord has preserved them till that point in time, and it's all biblical, you're just saying, oh, praise the Lord. Now, in our country, most people are not married now. My wife's a nurse, and she deals with small children. So we have a program in England called the Early Years, between 0 and 5, and they assign nurses to go into the community, and she very rarely meets a married couple. And the baby's all over the place, but nobody seems to be getting married anymore. And the idea is that, well, why would you get married? You know, that could be a disaster. You need to live together first, and then you see if it's going to work out, and if it's then you can get married later. Do you know what the statistics actually prove? You're more likely to get divorced if you live together than if you get married first. That's just a fact. Look it up on Google. You see, this idea that it's like, well, we'll see if it works. What they're saying is, how am I going to feel about her or him in 5 years' time? Maybe we're going to grow apart. Maybe we'll just get bored of each other. And so it's a kind of experimental feelings-based thing. And it's like marriage is based on love and feelings. I want to just turn that on its head. Is marriage based on love? Biblically, I rather think that love is based on marriage. You say, well, that can't be right. You're saying I've got to marry someone I don't love? Well, it depends what you think love is. If you think love is a fuzzy feeling because you've become infatuated with how someone looks or how someone dresses or how someone's photographs come shining on Instagram, whatever, that's all going to fade away at some stage. I wasn't just quite the same as I am now when I was first married. I had a little bit more hair and maybe a little bit better looking, I don't know. But what I'm saying is this. Love is a choice, ultimately. And if you just marry someone because you're infatuated with how they look, you're going to run into some problems down the line. The cornerstone of the family is marriage. And marriage is a commitment. What do they say when they stand at the front and say their vows? Why do they say those magic words, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health? What they're saying is, I am absolutely and totally committed to you. And though we might be 19 and 20, which would be rather young, but whatever age you get married at, 25, 26, 33, 34, whatever it is, what you're actually saying is, on that day, one of us is going to stand at the other's funeral. That's what you're saying. It is a total and absolute commitment. You say, what is it based on? We see, this is why, if you're a secular evolutionist, it's not based on anything. Are animals sort of faithful for one life? That's not even thinkable. On an evolutionary basis, you've got nothing to go back to. But marriage is based on a model. And the model for marriage is Christ and the church. It's not the other way around. It's not that Christ has joined himself with the church because Christ saw what Adam and Eve did. It's the other way around. Adam and Eve were brought together because in the mind and heart of God there was this grand eternal plan that Christ, the bridegroom, would be united to us, believers, saved between Pentecost and the rapture, who would make the bride, the church, and we would be united together. That's the model. That's the blueprint. So husbands are to love their wives in the same way that the Lord Jesus Christ loves his church. You say, well, how does the Lord Jesus Christ love his church? Well, do you know what he did for his church? He gave himself for the church. He came from heaven. He humbled himself. He became a servant. He didn't come to have everybody doing his bidding. He came to serve others and to love others. And he particularly loved the church. And he gave himself sacrificially for the church. He poured himself out for the church. That's the model. That's a tough model to follow, brother, isn't it? That's a tough one. But that's the model. To sacrifice for your wife. Do you do that? Do you help out? Or is it just about you and your car and your whatever else men are interested in? Football game or something? I know perhaps years ago there was very much a thought that, the wife does everything in the kitchen and she does all the washing and all the ironing and blah, 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 and so on, and the man just kind of sits there and reads his Bible. Well, if that ever was the case, that was a very bad way of operating things. Very bad way of operating things. It should be teamwork. I believe in roles in marriage, certainly, absolutely. The primary role of the mother, we're going to come on to that with the children and the home and so on, but that doesn't mean you just drive your wife into the ground because she's got some role and you never help out and you never put yourself out and you never switch something off or put something down or give of your time and give of your energy and get that job done that you've been saying you're going to do for X number of years. The commitment should be there. So the wife is asked to do a very hard thing. She's asked to submit to her husband. That's like heresy in our world, isn't it? But what does that actually mean? So this is the response. How is she to do that like Christ, like the church does to Christ? Do you find it hard to submit to Christ as a believer? Why don't you find it hard to submit to Christ? Because Christ is a gracious Lord. He says, I'm meek, I'm lowly of heart. Christ is not a slave driver. Christ is not an entitled person who just expects this, that, the other, never gives you anything in return. And so in the scriptures, you've got this sort of symbiotic relationship with this, a husband and a wife, and they don't find their roles difficult because they're both fulfilling those roles. To put it simply, if you want to be treated like a king, treat your wife like a queen. Does that make sense? If you want to be treated like a king, treat your wife like a queen. So based on this model of Christ and the church, marriage is not just one way in which men and women can live together. Marriage is the only way that men and women must live together. Isn't that lovely verse in Hebrews 13? Marriage is honourable in all, the bed undefiled. No more needs to be said. God is putting marriage on a high level. I know it's hard work. I know there are difficulties. I know you'll have to make compromises and you'll have to work hard at it. But that's the way life is. All relationships have to have their moments and their workouts. But this is the optimal design for men and women to live together in marriage. And God has designed it for companionship, for completeness, for fruitfulness, for preservation, for protection, for stability, for enjoyment. You say enjoyment. Yeah, do you know marriage is actually good for you? Google it. Or AI it, perhaps. I don't know whether that's a thing. People who get married tend to live longer, tend to be better physically, tend to have better mental health. These are just facts. These are just statistics. Dr. Linda Waite, she's a professor of sociology at the University of Chicago. She wrote a book called The Case for Marriage. She said marriage is sort of like a seatbelt when it comes to improving your well-being. So no matter what the world says of it, you can't improve on what God says in his word. The family is the bedrock of society. And marriage is the cornerstone of the family. So if you're not married yet, pray hard about it. Listen to what mum and dad say. They're not as stupid as you think they are. And be very slow and very cautious and seek the Lord's will. It is the biggest thing you'll ever do other than getting saved. So we have family, we have marriage, then we have the home. Just a few words about the home. Now, not everybody has the privilege of coming from a Godly Christian home. Maybe there's someone here today and you're the only Christian in your home. Or maybe you come from a home that in some way or another has huge difficulties and trials and tribulations. Well, let me just encourage you. The Lord lived in a difficult home. He lived in a home, John 7 verse 5, neither did his brothers believe in him. Even the town where he grew up, Nazareth, they weren't very impressed with him. Tried to throw him over the brow of the hill. The fact is, no home can escape difficulties and tragedies and bereavements at some time. But we're looking in general terms here at the home. And the home, biblically, is designed to be the safest, the most harmonious, the most blessed place on earth. There truly is no place like home. I'm, God willing, going home tomorrow. All things being equal, we'll get there in one piece. I'm looking forward to going home. Setting up and maintaining a home for the glory of God is a huge task and a huge privilege and a huge honor. How is that home to be structured? How is that home supposed to work? Well, we read about there in Ephesians. It is the father and the mother into whose hands God has entrusted the guiding and the rule of that home. And the children, they have a task to do. They have to honor their mother and their father. Proverbs puts it like this: my son, hear the instruction of thy father, and forsake not the law of thy mother. Now, one of the things that's being challenged today is the whole concept of roles. What we're told now is that we have role-less marriages. So there is nothing that's specifically designed for a woman to do, nothing that's specifically designed for a man to do. That they share everything. You can have a house husband or a housewife or whatever. There's no such thing as roles. Well, biblically, there are roles. We read there in Ephesians that the husband is the head. H-E-A-D. So a head, my head controls my body. It also feeds my body and directs my body and nourishes my body. But it has that position of being head. When you come into the book of Genesis, you find that the woman is given a title. It also begins with H. And the word is helper. Now you might think to yourself, oh, isn't that just fine? He gets to be the head and I'm just mother's little helper. Well, if you take that word helper and you look at through Scripture, it's not the idea of someone sort of coming along behind picking things up. The word helper there is actually used of God. The Lord is my help. The Lord is my helper. The word actually has the idea of being a strong ally. So what God is saying is that the marriage union brings into existence this team. They have different roles. You have the head and you have the helper. But without the head, the woman is not complete. And without the helper, the man is not complete. I like what Jim Allen says in his commentary on 1 Timothy. The ultimate responsibility for rule in the home is that of the man, but the administration is in the hands of the mother. And there is that working together. I mean, you can think of so many verses in Scripture. I was thinking of the verse about Abraham in Genesis 18. He will command his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord. You see that role that Abraham had. In 1 Timothy chapter 3, it talks about elders. If a man know not how to rule his own house, how will he take care of the church of God? So the husband is given that idea of guidance and ruling and so on. But the wife supports and reinforces and supplements what is being done at every turn. And you go to somewhere like Proverbs 31 and you see the virtuous woman. She oversees the ways of her household. We read there in 1 Timothy 5, she guides the house. If I can risk giving you a Greek word at 10 past 4 on a warm Sunday afternoon, 1 Timothy 5:14, the woman's role of guiding the house, in Greek it is oiko despotio, What do you think of that? Oikos is a house. What do you think despotio means? She's the despot of the house. 1 Timothy 5, verse 14. She guides the house. Titus 2, verse 5. She's a keeper at home. Oh, yes, I thought so. Chain her to the kitchen sink. No, that doesn't mean that at all. That word in 1 Timothy 2, verse 5 is oikouros. It's not a stayer at home. It's a keeper of the home. It's a guard of the home. So the role of the man is that role of ruling and guiding and instructing and ultimate responsibility. There's some fellas that are crazy, they just think being the head of the home is like some carte blanche, blank check to just boss everybody about. It's nothing to do with that. You should be terrified to be the head of your home. You are responsible for the whole thing. It ultimately falls on you to direct. And there will be some very big decisions that you will need to make in your life. And sometimes your wife may turn to you and say, well, I don't know what to do. You decide. And you might be lumbered with a very, very tricky, difficult situation. I personally would advise you, if your dear wife is not on board, say nothing and do nothing and keep praying about it. Because sometimes a wife has a sixth sense that you don't have. And when you come to big decisions, if you've taken a notion and you're absolutely sure of something and she's sitting there saying, I just don't feel right about this. Why wouldn't you just wait and pray? And if it's the Lord's will, the Lord will find a way. When Anthony Norris Groves wanted to go out as a missionary, his wife wasn't happy. He waited 10 years. So, you say to yourself, well, oh dear, I've got 2 minutes. What am I going to do about a job? Let me bite into that one for 2 minutes. So I'm a woman. Am I allowed to have a job? Certainly. We live in a wonderful day, where there's so much you can do now with the internet and everything from home. You can work from home a lot of the times, which makes your options a more open. What I would say is this. If God has given you a husband and children, it is quite clear that in the scriptures, your primary role is going to be the looking after the home and the raising of those children. And I think what we need to do is elevate that task for what it really is. I like what Spurgeon said. You are as much serving God in looking after your own children and training them up in God's fear and minding the house and making your household a church for God, as you would be if you had been called to lead an army to battle for the Lord of hosts. So there is no greater, no nobler, no more dignified task than being responsible for the physical, emotional, and spiritual development of children and managing the home in which they grow up. I don't know where, somewhere this week I was talking to somebody about the Wesley brothers. If you've never heard of Charles Wesley and John Wesley, well, you can look them up online. Charles Wesley was a great preacher of the gospel in the 1700s, started the Methodist Church and saw thousands of people saved, etc., etc. And his brother Charles wrote lots and lots of hymns. And Can It Be, Hark the Herald Angels Sing, and a whole lot of other. He wrote thousands of hymns. Do you know how many children their mum had? Don't try this, it's bad for your health. She had 19 kids. Now, several of them passed away, sadly, in childhood. And John had to be thrown out of a burning window when he was young. But I'm told that she gave an hour a week to each of those kids, one-on-one. And she must have done pretty well, because she produced two of the greatest the greatest Christians that have ever lived, John and Charles Wesley. We're still singing Charles's hymns, and John Wesley's influence was incalculable. France had a revolution, Britain had a revival, and John Wesley was the man at the centre of it all. You can go to his house, you can go to his church down in London, it's all there. In fact, I'll tell you a quick story. We had a brother over from Canada recently, from Winnipeg, and he'd heard all about Spurgeon and Wesley and all these people, and I said, do you want to go to London? I'll show you all where it happened. So we had a day out, and we went to the Metropolitan Tabernacle where Spurgeon was, and all these different places, and we got into Wesley's house next to his church. And you can go to Susanna's grave, we went to John Bunyan's grave, we had a whole great day out. And so we went into this place, and here's the kitchen, and here's the scullery, if you know what one of those is. And then we went to the next floor, here's the drawing room, and then went to the top floor. And we went to the top floor, and the lady who was doing the tour, she said, there was a 4-poster bed. She said, this is the bed in which Mr. Wesley died. Well, that really made the hair stand up on the back of my head. And then there was a little room off the bedroom. It's like a little hexagonal room, no bigger than... Well, it was just a small area like that with windows. And we went in, there was a little stool sitting there on a hard floor. And I said, what's this room for? She said, this is where Mr. Wesley got up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and he came in here and he prayed for an hour every day. Well, I thought the brother from Canada was going to levitate off the floor when he heard that. He was standing in the room where John Wesley prayed for an hour every day at 4 o'clock in the morning. I wonder where he learned that. I think he learned that at the knee of a woman called Susanna Wesley. And so when you trace it all back and you think, so France had a revolution and it became a secular country and the blood was running as the guillotines were flying and we were having a revival. 10,000 Methodist churches were built between 1800 and 1850. 10,000 physical Methodist churches were built. No, I'm not saying the Methodist denomination is the right place to go. I'm just saying that's the kind of impact that man had. On horseback, 40,000 miles and all of the rest of it. Turned the country upside down. I wonder how he did all that. Because of what he learned at his mother's knee. This is Mother's Day. I want to encourage you, dear sister, dear brother, in the bringing up of your children, in the preciousness and in the value of what you are doing in seeking to raise those children for God. God looks down from heaven and he thinks that is exceedingly precious. The family and marriage and the home. We'll close with a word of prayer.